300 years before our story begins, there is a place beyond the sky where the gods do not sleep. They watch, they meddle, they arrange pieces on a board no mortal eye can see, and they call it fate. The moon goddess is the oldest of them all, silver-haired, silver-eyed, patient as the tide. She does not hate mortals. She simply does not love them the way they love each other. To her, their suffering is data. Their devotion is fuel. Their grief is the engine that keeps the ancient magic moving. She created the wolves first, not out of kindness, but out of necessity. The world was too loud, too chaotic. It needed guardians. It needed order soaked in blood. So she reached into the darkness between stars and she pulled out fire, and she pressed it into the hearts of men, and she called them Lycans. Heck then, because power without purpose corrupts even gods, she gave them the bond, a mate, a soul match, a tether between two beings so complete, so absolute, that severing it was like tearing the moon from the sky. She thought it would stabilize them. She was wrong, because when you give something capable of violence the one thing worth protecting, you don't create a guardian, you create a weapon. And 300 years ago, when the moon goddess placed a girl named Seraphine into the world, a girl whose laughter could stop wars, whose soul burned like a second sun, she knew exactly what she was doing. She was lighting a fuse. Before we begin, if you love dark Lycan kings, forbidden mates, and stories that make your heart ache, like comment where you are watching from and subscribe for epic Lycan King romances. Guess where omegas rise, kings fall, and love is never gentle. The night the world burned. The battle lasted 7 hours. Kyle Draven did not count the bodies. He counted only one thing: the seconds since he last heard her heartbeat. They had come at midnight. 3 vampire covens and a demon host, converging on the northern Bloodpack's territory like a tide of shadow and rot. Kyle had been in this clearing before, had bled into this soil, had buried his father beneath the ancient oak at its edge, and he had never feared it. Tonight he feared it. Not for himself. He moved through the carnage like a force of nature. His wolf form was immense, nearly 9 feet at the shoulder, obsidian-furred, his eyes burning that particular shade of gold that his pack called warfire. Every vampire he reached ceased to exist. Every demon that challenged him became a memory. He was winning. He was always winning. And then, beneath the thunder of battle, beneath the screaming and the cracking of bones, he heard something go quiet, a heartbeat, her heartbeat. Kyle Draven, the great alpha of the northern blood pack, conqueror of the eastern demon reaches, terror of 6 covens and 2 vampire dynasties, stopped moving, just for 1 second, just long enough for the world to end. He found her in the ritual chamber they'd built beneath the roots of the ancient oak. His oak, his father's burial place. They had desecrated it with purpose, choosing the location specifically because it would hurt him most. Seraphine lay at the center of a blood sigil the size of a great hall. Her white dress was red now, when her golden hair was spread like a halo around a face that held, even in death, an expression of terrible peace. As though she had known this was coming and had made her choice not to fight it. Her chest was open, her heart was gone. Kyle did not howl, he did not weep. He stood over her, and he became something that had no name in any language spoken by the living. The last vampire in the clearing tried to run. It did not succeed. What happened next, historians would argue about for centuries. Some said the northern blood pack's alpha simply snapped. That grief and madness forged a monster where a man had been. Others said the moon goddess herself had intervened, pouring divine rage into a willing vessel. A few, with the very old, the very wise, said the truth was simpler and more terrible than either. They said Kyle Draven chose it. Every moment of what followed was a choice. He spent the first year hunting the architects of the ritual, the coven that commissioned it, gone. The demon clan that provided the components, gone. The lesser wolves who had betrayed his location to the enemy, gone. In the second year, he reached further. Any power that had known of the ritual and said nothing. Any neutral party that had chosen comfort over warning. Any creature that had watched Seraphine exist and not told him she was in danger. They called him the Alpha of Ruin. They said his eyes had turned from gold to crimson. They said he no longer slept, no longer ate, no longer did anything except pursue the next name, on a list that seemed to have no end. His beta, Marcus, a scarred and quiet man who had followed Kale since childhood, stayed at his side through all of it. Not because he approved, not because he believed it was righteous, but because someone had to be there when it was over. You're going to run out of enemies eventually, Marcus told him, in the third year, standing shin deep in the wreckage of what had once been a vampire lord's palace. Kale's voice was a ruin of itself, low, flat, emptied of everything that made it human. Then I'll make new ones. Marcus said nothing, because he knew it was true. A goddess in the dark. She came to him on a winter night in the 5th year, in the ruins of a monastery he had claimed as his base of operations. Kale was alone. He was always alone now. His pack had learned to maintain a careful distance. Not from fear of him exactly, but from fear of what proximity to his grief might do to them. It radiated off him like heat from a forge. It was the kind of sorrow that could break things it touched. He was sitting at the edge of a broken window, looking at the snow, not thinking, just existing, just enduring the minutes the way a stone endures rain. You look terrible, the moon goddess said. She was smaller than he expected. He had seen her once before, at his mating ceremony, a towering figure of silver light, voice like cathedral bells, presence like a hand pressed against your chest. Tonight she sat on the windowsill opposite him and looked merely elegant. A woman of indeterminate age, silver-haired, dressed in something that moved like smoke. Her eyes, though, her eyes were ancient in a way that made his own grief feel new. Leave, Kyle said. I will, she said pleasantly, after we talk. We have nothing to talk about. You let her die. I let a great many things happen, the goddess agreed, without apology. That is my nature. I maintain balance. I do not intervene. You knew this when you accepted the bond. I was 19 years old when I accepted the bond. I didn't know anything. A pause. In it, something shifted. Something in the goddess's expression that was almost regret. No, she said softly. You didn't. That is, perhaps a failure on my part. Cal looked at her for the first time. Really looked. Why are you here? Because you have done what you set out to do. The ritual makers are destroyed. The balance of vengeance is satisfied. She tilted her head. And because there is a conversation we must have about what comes next. There is no next. There is only, she is going to be reborn. The silence that followed was the loudest thing Kale had ever heard. He didn't move, didn't breathe, held the words in his mind and turned them over, searching for the catch. Souls of that magnitude do not simply end, the goddess continued. She was always going to return. It is the nature of what she carries. A pause. The question was always, to whom? To me, Kyle said. It wasn't a question. No. The goddess's voice was gentle, which somehow made it worse. Not to you. Not the way you mean. She laid out the conditions with the calm efficiency of someone reading a contract. Reborn as human. No bond. No memories. No instincts pointing her toward him. She would be mortal. Fragile, ordinary, unaware. And if Kale tried to force the truth on her before she was ready, it will bring disaster, the goddess said. Not just for you, for the world. There is a power sealed inside her soul. Ancient, sleeping. The bond, when it awakens, must do so naturally, organically. If you force it, what power? Kyle interrupted. The goddess hesitated. For the first time in the conversation, she looked uncertain. That, she said finally, is something you will discover when it is time, not before. She rose from the windowsill. The snow outside the window seemed to slow. 10 years, she said. She will be reborn in 10 years, grown, alive, fully herself, in every way that matters, except memory. She looked at him. Can you wait? Cal stared at the floor for a long time. And then, I've been waiting for 5 years already. The goddess smiled. It was the smile of someone who knows much more than they're saying. Yes, she said, you have. The human girl. The city was called Ashford. Kel had chosen it for the anonymity. A sprawling, noisy, impersonal human metropolis. The kind of place where an ancient Lycan alpha could maintain a corporate empire without attracting supernatural attention. The kind of place where no one asked too many questions about why the CEO of Draven Enterprises never seemed to age. He had been watching the city for 3 years by the time she arrived. He didn't know she was there at first. His wolf sense, usually a precision instrument, had been muted by a decade of grief. During he had grown so accustomed to her absence that he had almost forgotten what her presence felt like. And then one Tuesday morning, walking through the financial district in human form, wearing a suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent, his wolf went absolutely still. Mate. It was not a thought, not a word. It was something deeper than language. A recognition that lived in the bones, in the blood, in the dark ancient places of his nature that predated civilization. He looked up. She was 20 meters away at a crosswalk, arguing with a taxi driver through a rolled-down window. She was 25, perhaps 26, with dark hair pulled into a chaotic bun and paint on her left hand that she hadn't noticed yet. She was wearing a jacket 2 sizes too large and carrying a canvas bag that appeared to be losing a war with gravity. She was glorious, not in the way Seraphine had been glorious. Seraphine had been incandescent, otherworldly, a presence that filled every room she entered. This girl was glorious in a completely different way. She was real, fiercely, defiantly, exhaustingly real. She looked like someone who had fought for every good thing in her life and intended to keep fighting. Completely unacceptable, and if you think I'm paying for the extra distance you added by going around the block twice, you have a very exciting morning ahead of you. Cale stood very still and let the world happen around him. His wolf was making a sound he had not heard it make in 15 years. Something like joy. Something like relief, so profound it had edges. She won the argument with the taxi driver. He watched her cross the street with the triumphant stride of someone who has conquered something minor but meaningful, and his chest ached with 15 years of accumulated longing. Then she was gone, swallowed by the crowd. Cal stood at the crosswalk for a long time. Well, Marcus said, materializing at his shoulder with the practiced silence of someone who had been a beta for decades. She's here. A pause. Did she? She didn't feel a thing. The words tasted like ash. She walked right past the bond like it wasn't there. She's human, Cal. She has no wolf senses. She has no framework for, I know, a breath. I know. I thought there might be something, even just a flicker. Marcus was quiet for a moment. And what do you want to do? Cal watched the place where she disappeared. I want to make her stay. A pause, without her knowing why. The offer. Her name was Diana Vasquez. She was 26 years old. She had 3 part-time jobs, 11 rejection letters from design firms pinned above her desk like a macabre trophy wall, and exactly $43 in her checking account. She had no idea her life was about to change. The offer came through a recruiter, professional, discreet, suspiciously generous. Personal executive assistant to the CEO of Draven Enterprises. No formal interview process. Salary that would solve every financial problem she currently had, and several she hadn't encountered yet. She should have said no. She knew she should have said no. Every sensible instinct she had told her to say no. 'Cause she said yes. The Draven Enterprises building occupied an entire city block. Black glass and steel, 40 stories, with a lobby that felt less like a corporate entrance and more like the antechamber of something ancient. The art on the walls was not modern. The sculptures in the corners were not decorative. Diana walked through it with her spine straight and her face arranged into her most professional expression, and tried not to notice that the security guards moved with an inhuman stillness. She tried not to notice that the air tasted different here, charged, like the moment before a thunderstorm. His office was on the 40th floor. Kajal Draven stood at the window with his back to her, looking out at the city. He was tall, taller than she'd expected, with the kind of physical presence that made a room rearrange itself around him. Dark hair, dark suit, shoulders that spoke of a body built for something more demanding than corporate work. He did not turn around when she entered. "Diana Vasquez," he said. Not a greeting, more like a confirmation. "Mr. Draven." She kept her voice steady. "I was told there would be an interview process." "There won't be. With respect, I'd prefer to know why I'm being offered a position I didn't apply for before I accept it." He turned then. Diana had prepared herself professionally for a handsome boss, had told herself it wouldn't affect her, had rehearsed the mental separation between aesthetic appreciation and professional conduct. She had not prepared for this. It wasn't just that he was handsome. It was that he looked at her the way no one had ever looked at her, like she was simultaneously the most important thing in the room and the most dangerous. Like she was a puzzle he had been waiting to solve for a very long time. "I've reviewed your portfolio," he said. His voice was measured, controlled. "Your work is exceptional. The firms that rejected you were foolish." A pause. "I don't make that kind of mistake." "That's flattering, but the compensation package includes full benefits, creative latitude on internal projects, and a housing stipend." He named a salary figure that made her internal monologue briefly go silent. "You'll start Monday." Diana looked at him for a long moment. "Yes, you haven't asked me a single question about myself." "I know what I need to know." "That's concerning." Something shifted at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile, the ghost of one. "Monday," he said again. She should have said no. She said yes. Walking back through the lobby, Diana pressed her hand against her sternum where something odd had been happening since she walked into his office. A sensation she had no name for. A warmth that lived below reason. She told herself it was the salary. She was lying to herself. She just didn't know it yet. The watch. Cale had spent 15 years learning to be patient. He had spent those 15 years wrong. The patience required to watch her live, to be present for her coffee preferences and her Tuesday frustrations and the way she laughed at her own jokes before she finished telling them. This was a different kind of patience entirely. It required something he did not have a word for, something between restraint and devotion. She called her best friend on her lunch break, every day without fail. Her name was Priya, and she was apparently the keeper of Diana's sanity, the recipient of all her fears and celebrations, the counterweight to a life lived largely in her own head. "My boss is," Diana paused on the phone, while Cale pretended to review documents 15 feet away. "Extremely intense. Like aggressively intense. Hot intense or scary intense? Both? Neither? I genuinely cannot tell. He looks at me like..." Another pause. It's like he's reading something that's written on me. Something I can't see." Kyle put down his pen. "That's unsettling," Priya said. "It should be," Diana agreed. "It should be. And yet, I don't know. I feel safe," which makes absolutely no sense. He's enormous and silent, and occasionally I'm pretty sure he doesn't breathe. Diana. "What? Are you describing a man or a weather event?" Diana's laugh was short and genuine. "Both. He's like weather." Kyle picked his pen back up. His wolf said, "She feels something." He said, "Don't." His wolf said, "She does." He said, "It's not enough." And it wasn't. She felt something, but it was the vague, confused feeling of a human who has wandered too close to something supernatural. There was no bond in it, no recognition. She just a woman's instincts firing in the presence of something old and other. He wanted more. He wanted everything. He couldn't ask for it. So he watched and waited and permitted himself the small, terrible mercy of being near her. She was good at her job. He hadn't expected that, had known she was talented from her portfolio, but talent on paper was different from talent in motion. Diana approached every problem the way she'd approached the taxi driver, with complete conviction that she would prevail and zero interest in being reasonable about it. She redesigned the company's internal communication system in her second week without being asked, presented it to him with a single sentence of context and a folder full of mock-ups. He approved it without hesitation. "What, you're not going to ask me why I changed the format?" she said. "I can see why. It's better." She looked at him for a moment. Most CEOs would want to understand the reasoning. "Most CEOs," Cale said, "are not me." Diana rolled her eyes. He had discovered that this was her response to things she found simultaneously irritating and correct. He found it devastating. "You're impossible," she told him. "Yep," he agreed. "Sit down. We have the Singapore reports to review." She sat. She argued with him about 3 separate line items in the reports. She was right about 2 of them. He told her she was right. She looked at him like he'd said something extraordinary. "What?" he said. "You just admitted you were wrong. Immediately. No defensiveness." "Was I wrong?" "Yes. But then there was nothing to defend." She was quiet for a moment, looking at him with something he couldn't name. "My last boss," she said slowly, "took 45 minutes to admit he'd misspelled his own company's name." "That sounds exhausting." "It was." A pause. "This is..." "Surprisingly not." It was the smallest thing, the most ordinary thing. And Cale Draven, who had torn vampire lords apart with his bare hands, who had stood unmoved at the collapse of dynasties, had to put his entire will into remaining still, because what he wanted to do was reach across the desk and take her hand and tell her, "Nothing will ever exhaust you while I'm alive. I have been waiting 15 years. I am yours in every way I'm allowed to be, and in every way I'm not." Instead, he said, "Same time tomorrow. We have the quarterly reports." Diana nodded. She gathered her things. She left. Kyle sat in his office until midnight, learning to breathe again. The wizard arrives. Jaden Voss had not become the most powerful wizard in the Northern Hemisphere by being impatient. He had done it by being thorough. He arrived in Ashford on a Thursday with no luggage and no advance warning, and he rented a flat 2 blocks from Draven Enterprises, and he began to watch. He was 38 years old and looked 25, with the kind of angular, precise handsomeness that came from decades of not sleeping enough and caring exclusively about what was interesting. He had walked away from 3 different magical societies because they were too conservative. He had, over the course of his career, he'd done things that even other practitioners declined to discuss at parties. He was not, by most definitions, a villain. He was something worse. He was someone who had convinced himself that ends justified means, and who was very good at finding compelling ends. He had been tracking the soul for decades. Ancient texts, the ones that weren't kept in any library, that could only be found in the ruins of civilizations that predated human memory, spoke of a power that had been folded into human form at the dawn of the world, not created, contained, like a star compressed into a seed. The vessel, the texts agreed, would be unremarkable in appearance, would have no idea what they carried, would live a normal human life until something cracked them open. Jaden had been looking for the crack. He found Diana on his 3rd day in the city. Not by sight, by resonance. He was walking past a coffee shop when his magical senses, finely tuned, obsessively calibrated, caught something that made him stop walking mid-stride. Power, dormant, vast, patient, like a sleeping ocean. He looked through the window. A young woman, dark hair, paint on her left hand, arguing cheerfully with the barista about oat milk. Jaden Voss went very still. Then he took out his phone and called his assistant. "Find out everything," and he said, About a woman named Diana Vasquez, and find out who she works for. A pause. She works for Cal Draven. Jaden closed his eyes. Of course she does. His voice was very soft. Of course the Alpha has already found her. His assistant said something cautious about the wisdom of antagonizing a Lycan Alpha. He won't kill me, Jaden said. And he needs her alive and unharmed, which means he needs everyone who has information about her alive and, potentially, cooperative. He watched Diana win the oat milk argument. Beside, he said, I'm not going to take her from him. I'm going to offer her something he can't. What's that? The truth. Shadows that breathe. The first disappearance happened 6 weeks after Diana joined Draven Enterprises. A low-level employee, night security, a man named Thomas who'd worked the lobby desk for 11 years and brought homemade sandwiches on Fridays. Here one Thursday, gone by Saturday, no note, no trace. His apartment left as though he'd simply walked out in the middle of dinner and continued walking. The police filed it as an adult disappearance, noted he had no family, continued their other work. So Cal knew it wasn't a disappearance. He knew because Thomas had smelled faintly of sulfur the last time Cal passed him in the lobby, and because the cleaning team found, in the parking structure, a sigil burned into the concrete in a pattern that belonged to no art created after the 14th century. Demons. Old ones. Not the foot soldier variety he'd fought off at the periphery of the city 3 months ago. Something with enough intelligence to conduct reconnaissance. He convened his PAX Inner Council in the building's basement, a room that looked like a server center to anyone who wasn't paying attention, and that smelled like blood and old iron to anyone who was. They're building a picture, said Lyra, his head of intelligence. A compact, silver-haired woman who had been running information networks since before electricity. Mapping the territory, identifying assets. Assets, Marcus repeated. Her. Lyra's voice was flat. They know she's here. I don't know how. Our concealment protocols should have held. But they know. Cal's jaw was very tight. Who sent them? Unknown. But the sigil pattern matches 3 accounts in our archive, and all 3 have a common thread. What thread? Lyra met his eyes. The ritual. 15 years ago. Not the same actors, but the same school of thought. Someone who believes in what they were trying to accomplish. The silence in the room was very complete. So they're trying again, Marcus said. They never stopped, Kyle said quietly. They just had to wait for her to be reborn. He stood. Double the perimeter. No one approaches the building who isn't cleared by my office. I want eyes on her when she's not at work. Not contact, just surveillance, Lyra said. Protection. A pause. Discreet protection. He didn't say the other thing. The thing that sat beneath all of it, heavy and cold. They know what she carries, even if she doesn't, and what she carries is worth any price, even a war. The night he showed her. It happened on a Wednesday. Diana was working late. She often worked late, had adopted the habit of staying in the office long after the building emptied, because her apartment was small and the city was loud, and the Draven Enterprises building had, inexplicably, become the place she felt most like herself. She told Priya this on the phone, standing in the elevator on her way out. Or that's probably not healthy, Priya said. Neither is my coffee consumption. I've made my peace with it. Diana. Good night, Priya. She stepped out into the parking structure. Empty, late, concrete and shadow, and the distant sound of the city above. She made it 8 steps toward her car before she felt it. The air changed. The quality of the silence changed. Something old and attentive and utterly inhuman turned its focus on her from a direction she couldn't identify. Diana stopped walking. She had been ignoring her instincts for weeks. The ones that said the building was wrong, the ones that said the security team moved too smoothly, the ones that said her boss looked at her in a way that couldn't be explained by any category she had available. She had been filing them under anxiety and overactive imagination and imposter syndrome. Standing in the parking structure at 11:15 p.m., she decided she was done ignoring them. "Hello," she said. What came out of the shadows was not human. It had been human once, perhaps, or something that wore a human shape. Now it was wrong in every dimension. Too tall, too dark. Edges that moved in ways edges shouldn't move. Eyes that reflected light without producing it. It crossed the distance between them at a speed that had no business being possible. And then something hit it from the side. Something massive. Something that, in the seconds that followed, as Diana stood frozen in the harsh fluorescent light, and the world went very loud and very violent. She could not have described to anyone who hadn't seen it. Large, a black-furred, moving with a power that was entirely beyond the category of animal, because animals didn't choose like this, didn't position themselves between a threat and a person with the deliberate geometry of a shield. It destroyed the creature that had come for her. There was no other word for it. Not defeated, not drove off. Destroyed. Then the silence returned, and the massive dark shape shifted, compressed, reorganized itself into something human in a process that Diana's brain refused to file under anything except nightmare and magic. And this is real. This is real. This is actually real. Cal Draven stood in the parking structure in a destroyed suit, breathing hard. He turned to her. His eyes were still gold, not human gold. Something older and hotter than that. "What?" Diana said very carefully. "Are you?" His jaw tightened. The gold slowly drained from his eyes, leaving behind something she still couldn't read. Something enormous and careful and ancient. "Someone who protects you." Diana stared at him for a long time. "That's not an answer." "No," he agreed. "It isn't." He held her gaze and said nothing more. And Diana, who had spent her whole life in the human world, who had 30 years of understanding that certain things were not possible, felt the architecture of her reality begin, very quietly, to change. What she starts to notice. She didn't quit. She had expected to, had lain awake that night in her apartment running the logic. Creature, transformation, gold eyes, destruction. Reasonable conclusion, leave immediately. She had made coffee at 6 a.m. and concluded that she was not. Apparently reasonable. She had shown up to the office at 8:30 with a dark look that dared the universe to comment. Cale had been at his desk when she walked in. He looked up and something crossed his face. Relief, she thought, though he immediately buried it under that particular expression he used for boardrooms and the phone calls with governments. "You're here," he said. "Obviously. I wasn't sure you'd—" "I want answers," she said. "I'm not going anywhere until I have them. So, whenever you decide you trust me enough to explain what happened last night, I'll be at my desk." She sat down. She opened her laptop. She did her work. He watched her for a moment. "All right," he said quietly. She didn't look up. "All right what?" "All right, when the time is right. Answers." She nodded, said nothing. I kept working, but something had shifted between them. A wall between them had not come down exactly, but had become transparent. She could see through it now, and what she saw was a man made of contradictions, cold and careful and controlled on the surface, and underneath, something vast and aching. She began to notice things, how he always positioned himself between her and the door when they were in rooms with other people, how his head turned whenever someone new entered the building a fraction of a second before they were visible, how the building's security team shifted subtly whenever she moved through it, not following exactly, but redistributing, how, when she'd stayed late 3 weeks ago and fallen asleep at her desk, she'd woken to find a blanket arranged over her shoulders that had definitely not been there before. She'd asked Marcus about that. Marcus, who was Cale's beta and right hand, and the one person in the building she trusted to give her something adjacent to a straight answer. Marcus had looked at the ceiling. "The building gets cold at night," he'd said. "There's a blanket in this building's security closet." It's a well-prepared security closet. Diana had stared at him. "You're all lunatics," she said. "Yes," Marcus agreed seriously. We are. She told Priya about it. He put a blanket on you? Priya said. While I was asleep, silently, then apparently left. Diana, I know. That's either the most romantic thing I've ever heard or the opening of a horror movie. It's both, Diana said. Yeah, well, I'm pretty sure it's both. She was quiet for a moment. Why do I feel like I know him? She said very softly. I've known him for 2 months, but it feels like... She stopped. Like recognizing a word in a language you didn't know you spoke. Priya was quiet too. Be careful, she said finally. I'm always careful. You're never careful. You're brave, which is different. Diana laughed, short, surprised. I love you, she said. I know. That's why I'm telling you. The wizard makes contact. Jaden found her on a Saturday. She was at the farmer's market 3 blocks from her apartment. Alone, no security detail within visual range. Though Kyle's people were there, she just didn't know it. She had a bag of produce in one hand and an argument with a jam vendor apparently underway. He stepped into line beside her and waited. She noticed him immediately. He'd expected that. She was sharp, Diana Vasquez, sharper than the human world had calibrated to. She gave him the kind of assessing look that most people reserve for things they weren't sure were safe. You're not from this neighborhood, she said. No, he agreed. You've been standing there for 5 minutes without buying anything. I was waiting for a moment to introduce myself. He offered his hand. Jaden Voss. I work in research and development. Old magic specifically. Diana looked at his hand, did not take it. That's an unusual job title. It's an unusual field. He lowered his hand. I know who you work for, and I know a little about what you saw in that parking structure. The change in her expression was very small and very complete. Controlled, but not quick enough. I don't know what you're talking about, she said. You do. And I think part of you has been waiting for someone to tell you the truth. He held her gaze. I can do that. Not all of it. I don't have all of it, but more than you have. A long pause. Why would you? She said finally. Because I want something from you. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. He said it without apology. I want access to what you carry. Not you, he added, correctly reading her expression. Not your person. Something inside you that you aren't even aware of. A power. I'm a graphic designer. You're considerably more than that. Diana was quiet. He looking at him the way she looked at things she was thinking hard about. Why should I trust you? She said. You shouldn't. Not yet. He produced a card, plain, with only a phone number. But you should think about the fact that the man you do trust has known the truth for at least 2 months and hasn't told you a single thing. He left her with that. Walked away into the market crowd, and across the street, concealed by a coffee shop awning, one of Cale's watchers pulled out a phone and started typing. The fracture. You know him. It wasn't a question. Monday morning. Diana stood in the doorway of Cale's office. He had the surveillance report on his desk. He'd been reading it when she walked in, had not moved fast enough to put it away. He looked at her. She looked at the report. Why, you have people watching me, she said. To keep you safe. Without telling me? If I told you, I might have made choices you didn't want me to make. Her voice was steady and cold, and it cost her to keep it that way. Who is Jaden Voss? Cal was quiet. He's dangerous, he said finally. More dangerous than a creature in a parking structure? Different. He's... A pause, and she could see him choosing words with extreme care. He wants something from you that isn't his to take. He said the same thing about you. The words landed. Kyle flinched, a very small motion, but she was looking for it. Diana, he said. His voice was different. The control was still there, but something underneath it was bleeding through. Tell me the truth. She crossed the room, stopped 3 feet from his desk. All of it. Who am I? What is that man after? What are you after? Because I am done. I am done pretending that I'm not noticing everything. A long silence. If I tell you the truth, Cale said carefully, it will change things. permanently. There are consequences I can't predict. There are consequences to not telling me that seem fairly predictable, she said. Starting with, I walk out of here and call Jaden Voss. Don't. Then talk. He stood, moved to the window, stood with his back to her in the same posture he'd had on her first day. But everything else was different. I am not human, he said. Neither is Marcus. Neither is most of the staff here. She had known this. Hearing it was still something. What are you? Lycans, werewolves in the older language, the people who came before the words. A breath. Yeah, the creatures that have been watching this building, demons and vampires and things with older names than either. Yes. And me? He turned, and what she saw in his face was something she didn't have a category for. Something immense and ancient and terrifying, and so devastatingly raw that it made her chest hurt. You, he said, are the most important person in this world, and the most dangerous, and the most protected. By you. Yes. Why? The longest silence yet. Because, he said, and his voice was very quiet, you were given to me a long time ago, and then you were taken away. And when you came back, he stopped, closed his eyes, opened them. I promised I wouldn't tell you the rest. Not like this. The conditions, he exhaled. There are conditions. Diana stared at him. Someone gave you conditions about me. Yes. Who? He looked at her. The moon goddess. Diana sat down, not gracefully, directly on the floor. Kyle moved instantly, was at her side before she processed that he'd moved, and she held up a hand. Give me a minute. Of course. He sat on the floor beside her, not touching, just present, the way he always was. Diana sat on the office floor and restructured 30 years of understanding. Then she said, what happens if you tell me the rest? His jaw was tight. Something bad, something I can't name or predict. The goddess was specific about the consequences being mine, and everyone's, to endure. But not mine specifically. He was quiet. I don't know. She nodded slowly. Okay, she said. Okay? Okay. You've been watching me because someone wants to use me for something dangerous. You can't tell me everything because a goddess said not to. Jaden Voss is also interested in what I carry. She pressed her fingers to her temples. I'm going to need significantly better coffee for the rest of this conversation. Kyle stared at her. Then, for the first time in 15 years, Kyle Draven laughed. It was a quiet thing, rusty, surprised, but real. Diana looked at him, and the expression on her face was the most complicated thing he had ever seen. I'll have Marcus bring coffee, he said. Thank you, she said. And Kale. Yes. When the conditions change, when you can tell me the rest. Yes. Don't wait for the right moment, just tell me. He looked at her. All right, he said. All right, she said. I can tunic. The Alliance of Shadows. Jaden Voss moved quickly once he understood the timeline. The demons that had been circling Ashford were not, as Kale's intelligence suggested, a unified force. They were representatives, scouts from 7 different entities, all circling the same prize, all trying to reach her first. Jaden had done what he did best, walked into the middle of it. You don't want her, he told the eldest of the demon representatives, a creature that wore a banker's body with the same comfort a human wore clothes they'd borrowed. You want what's inside her, and you can't access it, not directly. And you can, the creature said. I can build a bridge between what she carries and what you need. Jaden spread his hands. I'm not asking you to give me access to the power. Yeah, I'm asking you to hold off the other factions while I work. When it's done, we divide the benefits. A pause. And the Alpha. The Alpha is a complication, not an obstacle. He destroyed the Verendis Coven. He's also in love with her. Jaden said it with the flat certainty of a man who has done his research. Which means he has a weakness we can leverage. He won't risk her safety. He won't shift the battlefield to a place where she might be caught in the crossfire. The demon banker considered this. You're very confident. I'm very thorough, Jaden corrected. It's different. The deal was struck that night. 7 demon factions and a wizard, all of them pointing the same direction, toward Diana. 3 nights later, the vampires approached Kale directly, not in hostility, in warning. 3 senior members of the Ashford Coven, led by a woman named Celeste who had been alive long enough to know when a situation was beyond her preferred risk tolerance. We have nothing to do with what's coming, Celeste said. She was in Cal's building, had come in with their hands very visibly open. No weapons, nothing concealed. We want it known. Then tell me what's coming, Cal said. 7 factions. The wizard is running them. He's, and I mean no flattery here, because I don't do flattery. More dangerous than you've estimated. What does he want? The power in the girl, same as everyone. A pause. But Voss isn't interested in using it the way the demons are. He wants to understand it, reverse engineer it, extract a blueprint. And then, Celeste said, he could replicate it, build it into something, or someone. She met his eyes. Anything with that kind of raw generative power, amplified and directed by a trained magical intellect? She trailed off. She didn't need to finish. Kyle stood very still. When? He said. Soon. He's close to a working understanding of the mechanism. Once he has it, he'll move. Why are you telling me this? Celeste looked at him with ancient, calculating eyes. Because whatever happens when that door opens, she said, I would rather be standing next to the Alpha than across from him. A pause. Smart, Cal said. Alive, she corrected. Same thing, at my age. The night before Diana found out about the alliance from Marcus, not because he told her, but because she had spent 3 months learning to read the building's rhythms, and when those rhythms changed, she noticed, the security protocols doubled. The inner ring of the pack began arriving at dawn and staying past midnight. Maps appeared on the conference room walls with zones marked in colors she didn't recognize. She stood in the doorway of the war room and she said, Tell me what I need to know. Marcus looked at Kyle. Kyle looked at the map. They're coming for you, Kale said. Within the next 48 hours, Jaden Voss, 7 demon factions, and whatever vampire elements he's managed to turn since Celeste's people stood aside. Because of what I carry, yes, which you still won't tell me about. He looked at her. The expression on his face was one she had never seen before. Not the controlled executive, not the alpha running tactical decisions. Something stripped back, was something human in the deepest, truest sense, which was ironic because he wasn't human at all. I want to, he said, more than I want almost anything. Then, if I do it now, right now, under this pressure, in this urgency, it would be wrong. The conditions aren't about logistics. He held her gaze. They're about you having the space to receive it, to decide what it means. Not in a war room, not the night before a battle. Diana looked at him for a long time. Okay, she said. He looked surprised. I trust you, she said. The words came out simply without decoration. I don't know why. I've thought about it a lot. But I do. So, okay, after. Something moved across his face. After, he said quietly. And Kyle, yes. Don't die, I'll be furious. He almost smiled. Yeah, I'll keep that in mind. The war comes to Ashford. It started at 3 a.m., not subtly, not with scouts or probes or careful tactical positions. Jaden had decided, correctly Kale would later acknowledge, that subtlety was no longer useful. The Alpha knew he was coming. The element of surprise was gone. What remained was force. So he brought force. 7 demon factions is a number that sounds abstract until you see it. Until the sky above Ashford's financial district goes the color of a bruise, and creatures pour out of it the way water pours from a broken dam. Until the sound of it reaches the building. Not gunfire, not thunder, but something older than either. A resonance that rattled in the bones and said, this is what the world is made of underneath. This is what you built your cities on top of. Where Kale's pack met them. 43 Lycans, 12 vampires from Celestis Coven, and 3 human practitioners that Lyra had recruited from networks that operated below even supernatural notice, against 7 factions and a wizard. This is inadvisable, Marcus said, standing at Kale's shoulder, watching the sky turn. Yes, Kale said. We're badly outnumbered. We are. And you're smiling. I've been outnumbered before. A pause. Tell me a number I haven't beaten. Marcus thought about it. There isn't one, he admitted. No, Cal said. There isn't. He shifted, and the Alpha of Ruin went to war. Diana watched from the 40th floor. She had been given specific instructions. Stay in the building's core, away from windows, in the secondary security room with Lyra. The room had 3 exits, and all warded. She was safe. She watched through the security feeds anyway. She watched Cal move through the battle the way she'd watched him move through boardrooms, with complete intentionality, without waste, like a man who had done this so many times that the decisions had become something below thought. She watched him tear through things that should not have existed, and she felt in her chest a sensation she did not have a name for. Not fear for him. Well, fear for him, yes. But underneath that, something else. Something like, I know you. Something like, I have always known you. And then the roof alarm sounded. Jaden Voss was in the building. He hadn't come through the lobby, hadn't come through any of the entry points they'd warded. He'd come through the air. A teleportation working of considerable sophistication. He bypassing the physical constraints but triggering the energy sensors Lyra had embedded in the building structure. He was already on the 38th floor when the alarm sounded. He reached the 40th floor 11 seconds later. Lyra put herself between him and Diana and was thrown into the wall with enough force to crack it. Not killed, Jaden was precise with his harm, but removed. Diana faced him. He looked, she thought, genuinely tired. Not cruel, not triumphant. Tired and focused, in the way of someone finishing a long project. I'm sorry it came to this, he said. I genuinely hoped we could do it differently. You tried the market approach, she said. Her voice was steady. I said no. You didn't say no, you said you needed to think about it. That's a no with better phrasing. He almost smiled. I just need to understand the mechanism, he said. I'm not going to hurt you. I need you alive and whole for this to work. What I'm going to do is unpleasant. I won't lie to you, but not permanent. A man who has to open with, I won't hurt you, has usually already hurt someone. Diana, what is it? She said. The thing inside me. What is it actually? He paused, looked at her with genuine interest. You really don't know? No one will tell me. The Alpha really kept his promise, Jaden said, and it sounded almost like respect. Extraordinary. Tell me what it is. A pause. The battle sounds from below filtered up through the walls. It's the original fire, Jaden said. The source power. The thing the gods used before they learned to create magic through other channels. It was sealed away. In a person, which is the only vessel complex enough to hold it, before the first civilization. It's been passing from host to host for millennia. Passing through me. Living in you. He took a step toward her, and it's about to wake up. Whether I do this or not, the bond, whatever is happening between you and the Alpha, is already cracking the seal. Diana stared at him. He knows this? The goddess knows this. Whether she told him, Jaden shrugged. You'd have to ask. I'm asking you instead. I know. Another step. Come with me, Diana. Not as a prisoner, as someone who needs answers. I can give you more than the Alpha can. I don't have conditions. The room was very quiet. Outside, through the walls, the battle continued. No, Diana said. He stopped. I have conditions too, she said. Mine are different from his. Mine are, I choose who I trust, and I've already chosen. A pause. Jaden Voss looked at her for a long moment. The bond really is forming, isn't it? he said quietly. He moved, and the window behind Diana exploded inward. The bond cracks open. Kyle reached the 40th floor in 17 seconds. He knew because he counted. He counted because if he didn't give his mind something to do, it would abandon tactics entirely and become something that the building would not survive. He came through the door in human form. The hallway was too narrow for anything else, and stopped. Diana was on her feet, unharmed. Between her and Jaden Voss, the air was doing things air should not do, compressing into shapes, vibrating at a frequency that made the walls hum. But it was not Jaden doing it. It was Diana. She didn't know. He could see that from her face. The shock of it, the confusion. Her hands were raised not in any defensive posture she'd been taught, but because the air was pulling at them, reaching through them, using them as a channel for something that had been sleeping for a very long time. Light was coming from her. Not metaphorically, not poetically. Actual light, warm and gold and violent, the color of the moment before dawn, filling the room from a point at the center of her chest and expanding. Jaden had his hands raised, and his eyes were the expression of a man watching a theorem he'd been working on for decades solve itself. There it is, he breathed. There it is. Diana, Kyle said. She turned, and he saw the moment she saw him. In his true form, the war still on him. Blood and ash, and the evidence of 15 years of grief and 5 years of waiting and 2 months of pretending. She saw all of it, and her face did not do the thing he had feared for 2 months. It did not go cold or frightened or calculating. It went open, like a door. Kyle, she said, not a question. Something in the bond, the dormant, cursed, conditional thing the moon goddess had left between them, shifted. Not fully, not yet, but it moved, like a tide beginning to turn. Jaden felt it happen. Kyle felt it. The light from Diana's chest surged and she gasped. Not pain exactly, but something overwhelming. The seal, Jaden said, backing toward the window. Not retreating in defeat, withdrawing like a scientist who has observed enough. The seal is cracking, not from my doing, from... Get out, Kyle said. Jaden looked at him. I'll be back, he said. Not as an enemy, as an interested party. What happens next will require more than a pack of wolves and a stubborn woman. Get out! He went. The battle below was winding down. He could feel it through the building's bones, through the pack bond, through the particular silence that followed the end of organized resistance. And Diana was still standing in the middle of the room, the light slowly subsiding, her hands trembling. Kale crossed the room. He stopped in front of her, close enough to reach her, not reaching. Are you hurt? No. She looked at her own hands. What was that? The truth, he said quietly. Starting to come out. She looked up at him. Tell me, she said, the rest. All of it. I know the conditions. I know the risks. Now tell me anyway. He looked at her, and he thought about the moon goddess's warning. He thought about 15 years. He thought about every night he'd spent alone in buildings that were too quiet and cities that were too loud and a grief so large it had its own gravity. He thought about a blanket draped over the shoulders of a sleeping woman, a laugh surprised out of him in an empty office, the sound of a heartbeat he had spent 5 years missing and 15 years waiting for. Your name was Seraphine, he said. Diana went still. And I loved you. The words came out without decoration, without armor. 15 years of precision and control dissolved into 6 words. I loved you, and you died, and the world gave you back to me in a new shape and told me I couldn't tell you. And I tried. I tried to honor the conditions. I tried to give you time. He stepped closer. But you asked me not to wait for the right moment. She breathed. You told me, he said, to just tell you. A long silence. She started, stopped. Something was happening behind her eyes, something turning over, like sediment disturbed in deep water. I don't remember that. I don't remember anything you're describing. I know. But, she said slowly, and her voice was strange and careful, like someone reading by dim light. I feel... She pressed her hand to her chest. Something, she whispered, like I've always felt something, since the first day I walked in here, and I didn't know what to call it. Like a word in a language I wasn't taught. Yes, he said. Is that what a bond is? Yes. Her hand was still pressed to her chest. The light there had gone quiet, but it was not gone. It was waiting. Okay, she said. Okay, he said. He reached out. She let him. His hand covered hers over the place where the light had been. And the bond, fragile, conditional, technically cursed, shuddered and held. High above the world, the moon goddess watched. She sat on a throne made of compressed starlight, and she rested her chin in her hand, and she watched the 41st floor of a building in Ashford, where a wolf and a woman stood in a room still echoing with the evidence of something ancient beginning to wake. Well, she said, to no one, to everyone, to the vast and indifferent cosmos that had been waiting, as she had, for this particular moment. He told her. She rose from the throne, not in anger, not in surprise. She had known he would tell her the moment he stopped running from the question. What she had not known, what she had calculated as a probability, not a certainty, was this: what Diana would feel when he did. The bond activating was expected. The seal cracking was expected. The light, the original fire, the source power waking from its long sleep in the warmth of recognition, she had anticipated that too. What she had not anticipated was the magnitude. When the bond snapped into full resonance, when 15 years of grief and suppression and careful, agonizing patience collapsed into a single moment of true acknowledgement, the power that lived in Diana Vasquez's chest did not simply wake. It erupted. Not visibly, not yet. Downstairs in the aftermath of the battle, and of the surviving members of the 7 factions felt it and went very still. In her flat 2 blocks away, Celeste felt it and went to her window. In the city below, the very old, the very sensitive, the things that lived in the gaps between human sight, they all turned at exactly the same moment, in exactly the same direction. The goddess felt it, felt the power of 100,000 years of careful containment let go all at once. Oh, she said, very quietly, that's what it was waiting for. Below, Diana went very still. Cal felt it through their contact. Through the hand he'd placed over hers, through the half-formed bond, through every sense he possessed. Something was happening inside her. Not pain, not quite. More like pressure. The pressure of something very large trying to fit through a space not built for it. Diana, She stopped. Her eyes had gone somewhere else, somewhere inward. I'm seeing... Don't move. I'm seeing... Her voice was strange, layered, like 2 voices using the same throat. I can see, so many. Diana, stay with me. There are lives, she said. Not memories, lives, hundreds of them. Her hand tightened on his. They all end the same way. Fire, a great fire, and then, her breath caught. And then I'm somewhere else. I'm someone else. And I don't, a pause. I don't remember. I never remember. You remember now, he said. His voice was very steady. He was holding her up physically now, one arm around her. Why, she said. Why is it waking up now? Why here? Why? She stopped. She looked at him. Oh, she said very quietly. What? Oh, it's... She pressed her free hand to her mouth for a moment. It's been waiting for the bond. It's tied to the bond, isn't it? The power. It doesn't wake up in isolation. It wakes up when you're recognized, Cale said. When I'm home, she said. The light came back, not violent this time. Warm, steady, like a fire that has found the hearth it was built for. High above, the moon goddess felt the seal complete its dissolution. She had known this would happen. She had set it in motion. She had arranged every piece on the board: the death, the rebirth, the conditions, the warning, the wizard, the factions, the timeline. She was the moon goddess. She was very old, and she was very, very good at this. What she had not allowed herself to know, what she had buried under centuries of professional detachment, was what it would feel like to watch it complete. A wolf who had spent 15 years becoming a monster. A soul that had spent 100,000 years carrying something it couldn't name. Both of them, standing in a room full of broken glass in the aftermath of a war, holding hands over a light that was finally theirs. The goddess sat back down on her throne. She did not cry. She was a goddess. Goddesses did not cry. The cosmos, which had been watching all of this with the patient interest of something that has seen everything and is still occasionally surprised, said nothing. The goddess looked at the things she'd built, counted the things she had constructed out of grief and patience and carefully calibrated cruelty. Good, she said. Then, now. In the room on the 40th floor, Diana exhaled. The light steadied. The memories quieted. The bond settled into something that was neither new nor old, but simply permanent. She looked at Kyle. He looked at her. In 15 years, he had not allowed himself to imagine this, had considered it too dangerous, too likely to drive him into behavior the goddess had forbidden, too close to the kind of hope that breaks people. He had not imagined that it would feel, not like triumph, but like exhaling, Diana said. He blinked. Sorry? It feels like exhaling, she said. Like I've been holding my breath for... She stopped. Her eyes went distant for a moment. Nah, a very long time. Yeah, he said. It does. A pause. Kyle. Yes. There's going to be more, isn't there? It wasn't a question. Yes, he said. The power. What it means, what the demons want. Jaden Voss. All of that. And the goddess isn't done with us. No, he said. I don't think she is. Diana considered this. Okay, she said. But later. Later, he agreed. Outside, Ashford began to reassemble itself. The sky turned from bruised violet back to the ordinary charcoal of early morning. In the streets below, the evidence of a supernatural war began to disappear with the efficiency that came from years of cleanup protocol. In a 40th floor office, two people stood in the quiet and let the later be later. What the moon goddess had not told Kyle, what she had not told anyone, not in the terms they would have understood, was the truth about the power now awake in Diana Vasquez. It was not a weapon. It was not a key. It was not exactly a door. It was a hinge, the thing on which the world turned. The original fire had not been sealed away for safekeeping, or for punishment, or because anyone feared it. It had been sealed away because it was not yet finished. It had been building. Through every life, every vessel, every death and rebirth in 100,000-year accumulation of experience. It had been learning, and what it had needed, the final component, the thing that would complete it, was something that could not be manufactured or forced or strategically arranged. It needed to witness love that survived death, love that waited. Love that held conditions and honored them not from obedience, but from genuine understanding of what another person needed. It needed, in other words, exactly what Cale Draven had given it. 15 years of everything he had. The goddess sat on her throne and felt the power complete its final synthesis, and she thought, worth it. She thought, I could not have built this. It had to be lived, she thought. They are going to be so angry when they find out I knew. She smiled. It was the smile of someone very old who has just watched something very new come into being. Now, she said again, to the waiting cosmos, now we begin. To be continued in the Alpha's reborn mate, awakening. The original fire has woken. The door is open. And what stands on the other side has been waiting far longer than a wolf. End of book 1.